You have got to be kidding me. Douglas Aldrich stood frozen in the first-class cabin doorway, his carry-on suspended mid-motion, his face draining of color as recognition crashed through him like a wave against stone. 7 years of blessed silence. 7 years of carefully constructed distance. And now, of all the flights crossing the Atlantic on this particular Thursday in October, she was here. Seated in first class. Reading a book as though the world had not once burned down around them both. Nora Callahan looked up from her novel, and Douglas watched her expression shift through surprise, then pain, then something harder and more controlled. She closed her book with quiet precision and met his gaze with the composure of a woman who had learned to expect nothing and prepare for everything. "Hello, Douglas." Her voice was calm. Not cold, not warm. Simply present, like a door neither open nor closed. He found his feet moving toward her. Found his mouth forming words he had not planned to say. "Of all the flights in the world. Of all the seats in first class. You had to be on mine." She glanced at the empty seat beside her, then back at him. "The airline chose my seat. Not me. If I had known you were on this flight, I would have taken a train across the ocean before booking it." Douglas felt something twist in his chest. Something that might have been old anger, might have been something else entirely. He made a decision in that moment. A petty decision. A decision that would cost him more than he could possibly imagine. He slid into the empty seat beside her. Not his assigned seat. The seat he had chosen specifically because he could see how much his proximity would unsettle her. "Well," he said, settling back with deliberate casualness. 7 years of silence, and now 12 hours trapped together. What are the odds? Nora's knuckles whitened around her book. "You always did enjoy making people uncomfortable," she said quietly. "Some things never change. And you always did enjoy pretending you had done nothing wrong." He leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "But we both know the truth, do we not? We both know what you did." Her eyes met his. Steady, unwavering, holding something he could not quite read. "No, Douglas. You know what you decided to believe. That is not the same thing." What Douglas Aldrich did not know in that moment was that in 6 hours, he would be standing frozen on the tarmac at Boston Logan International Airport, watching 3 children with his own dark eyes and his own stubborn chin climb out of a waiting Bentley, calling for their mother. What he did not know was that the woman beside him had tried to tell him the truth 7 years ago, and he had refused to listen. What he did not know was that the certainty he had carried like armor all these years was about to shatter into pieces too small to ever reassemble. Welcome back to another powerful story, my beloved listeners. Kindly tell me where you are watching from and what time it is where you are at. If you are new here, prepare for a story of betrayal, unexpected love, and what truly makes a family. Drop everything and listen closely. This tale of heartbreak and redemption might just change how you view love and family forever. Some people believe that love is patient and kind. They believe it keeps no record of wrongs, that it always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Douglas Aldrich had believed that once. He had believed it with the fervor of a man who had found something he never expected to find. And when that belief shattered, he had replaced it with something else entirely. Certainty. The absolute conviction that his judgment was sound, his conclusions correct, his pain justified. For 7 years, that certainty had sustained him. It had fueled his ambition, hardened his heart, built his empire higher and wider than he had ever imagined possible. Now, seated beside the woman he had once loved more than his own life, Douglas Aldrich was about to learn the true cost of being certain. And the lesson would come not through argument or explanation, but through the faces of 3 children he had never known existed. But that revelation was still hours away. For now, there was only the cramped intimacy of first class, the recycled air, the loaded silence between 2 people who had once shared everything and now shared nothing at all. The flight attendant approached with practiced cheerfulness. "Can I get either of you something to drink before we take off?" "Scotch," Douglas said immediately. "Neat." "Just water, thank you," Nora replied. Her voice warmed toward the attendant in a way it had not been toward him. When the attendant moved away, Douglas found himself studying his former wife. The years had changed her, though he could not quite identify how. Her chestnut hair was shorter now, falling just past her shoulders instead of down her back as he remembered. There were fine lines at the corners of her eyes that had not been there before. But her posture remained the same. That quiet dignity. That refusal to shrink. "You look different," he said finally. "Time does that to people." "I meant it as a compliment. I did not ask for one." The sharpness in her voice surprised him. The Nora he remembered had been gentle, accommodating, eager to smooth over conflict. This woman had edges he did not recognize. The plane began its taxi toward the runway, and Douglas felt the familiar pressure of acceleration pushing him back into his seat. 12 hours. 12 hours beside a woman who had betrayed him, who had made him look like a fool, who had destroyed everything they had built together. Or so he believed. "So," he said as the plane lifted off. "What brings you to London? Business or pleasure?" Nora did not look up from the window. "Conference. Hospitality industry trends." Douglas felt a flicker of surprise. He had assumed she had left the industry entirely after their divorce. He had assumed she had retreated into obscurity, living off whatever settlement she had managed to extract from their marriage. "I did not realize you were still working in hospitality. There is a great deal you do not realize." Something in her tone made him pause. A weight beneath the words that he could not quite interpret. The flight attendant returned with their drinks, and Douglas took a long sip of his scotch, welcoming the familiar burn. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "I heard about Cross." Nora's hand stilled on her water glass. She did not look at him. "Did you? 3 years ago. The federal charges. The conviction." Douglas swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "Quite the scandal. My former business partner, embezzling millions. Attempting to frame me for his crimes." "Yes," Nora said. "Quite the scandal. I suppose you feel vindicated." Now she did look at him, and the expression on her face was not what he had expected. Not triumph. Not satisfaction. Something closer to exhaustion. Something that looked almost like pity. "I do not feel vindicated, Douglas. I feel tired. Tired. 7 years is a long time to carry something." She turned back to the window. "And vindication does not give back what was lost." Douglas wanted to ask what she meant. He wanted to press, to demand, to understand. But something in her voice stopped him. Something that suggested there were depths here he had not considered. Truths he had not examined. But that was impossible. He had examined the truth thoroughly. He had seen the evidence with his own eyes. He had made his judgment based on facts, not emotion. Had he not? To understand how Douglas Aldrich and Nora Callahan had arrived at this moment, seated beside each other on a transatlantic flight with 7 years of bitter silence between them, one must go back to the beginning. To a time when love seemed not only possible but inevitable. To a time when Douglas still believed in kindness, and Nora still believed that being heard was simply a matter of speaking clearly enough. They met at the Waverly, a struggling boutique hotel on the coast of Maine that Douglas had acquired for well below market value. He was 43 then, already building what would become Aldrich Luxury Properties, already developing a reputation as a man who saw potential where others saw failure. Nora was 36, the guest relations manager at a competing property down the coast. She had a gift that Douglas recognized immediately, not just for hospitality, but for understanding what people needed before they knew they needed it themselves. He had approached her after a tourism conference, where she had given a presentation on creating emotional connections with guests. "Your philosophy is interesting," he said. "But how does it scale?" She had looked at him with those steady brown eyes, and he had felt something shift in his chest. "It scales because it is not a philosophy," she replied. "It is a practice. You cannot systematize genuine care, but you can hire people who are capable of it and then get out of their way." He had offered her a job that same evening. She had turned him down. "I do not work for people I do not trust," she said simply. "How can you know whether you trust me? You have only just met me." Exactly. It had taken him 3 months to earn her trust. 3 months of phone calls and meetings and long conversations about what hospitality could be when it was done with intention rather than mere efficiency. By the time she finally agreed to join his company as vice president of guest experience, he was already in love with her. By the time she understood the depth of his feelings, she had fallen in love with him too. Their wedding was small. A ceremony in the garden of the first hotel they had redesigned together. Nora wore a simple cream dress, and Douglas cried during his vows, something he would later deny to anyone who asked. For 5 years, they built something remarkable. Not just a company, but a partnership that seemed to prove that ambition and compassion could coexist. Aldridge Properties became known not just for luxury but for warmth. For the housekeeper who remembered that a guest's mother had just passed and left fresh flowers in her room without being asked. For the concierge who noticed that a child was nervous about an upcoming surgery and arranged for a personal note from her favorite author. These touches were Nora's legacy. The systems that made them possible, her design. And Douglas. Douglas was proud of her. Proud of what they were building together. Proud of the life they shared. But pride, he would learn, was not the same as trust. And certainty was not the same as understanding. The first cracks appeared in their 5th year of marriage. It began with Martin Cross. Cross was Douglas's business partner and chief financial officer. They had known each other since business school, had built the early foundation of the company together. Douglas trusted him implicitly. Nora did not. She could never quite articulate why. Cross was charming, competent, unfailingly polite. But something about him made her uneasy. The way his smile never quite reached his eyes. The way he deflected questions about financial details with jokes instead of answers. The way he watched Douglas sometimes, when Douglas was not looking. "I do not trust him," she told Douglas one evening. "There is something wrong there. I can feel it." Douglas had sighed, setting down the quarterly report he had been reviewing. "You feel it." "Nora, I cannot run a company on feelings. Martin has been with me since the beginning. His numbers are impeccable. His loyalty is absolute. I am not asking you to fire him. I am asking you to pay attention. To look more closely at the accounts. I have looked at the accounts. I review them quarterly. Everything is in order." Then why does he get nervous when I ask questions about the coastal development budget? He gets nervous because you interrogate him like a prosecutor. Not everyone appreciates your directness, darling. The darling was meant to soften the criticism, but Nora heard the dismissal beneath it. Her concerns were emotional, not rational. Her instincts were not evidence. She stopped bringing up Cross after that. But she did not stop watching. There was something else weighing on their marriage in those years. Something they rarely discussed, though it hung between them like a presence in every room. Children. They had been trying for 2 years. Quietly at first, then with increasing medical intervention. Tests and treatments and appointments that Nora attended alone because Douglas was always in meetings, always traveling, always building the next phase of the empire. The doctors could find no clear explanation. Everything appeared normal. Sometimes they said, "It simply takes time." But time was passing, and Nora felt the absence of children like a phantom limb. She had wanted to be a mother for as long as she could remember. The nursery they had prepared during their first year of marriage sat empty, the door usually closed. Douglas dealt with the disappointment differently. He stopped talking about it entirely. "We have the company," he told her once, when she tried to raise the subject. "We have each other. Is that not enough?" It was not a question he wanted answered. It was a door he wanted closed. Nora learned to stop knocking on that door. She learned to carry her grief privately, to fold it into the corners of herself where it would not disturb him. And so they continued, building their empire, drifting slowly apart without either of them quite noticing the distance growing. Until the evening when everything shattered. Nora discovered the discrepancies by accident. She was reviewing guest compensation files, looking for patterns in complaint resolution, when she noticed something odd. A series of payments that did not match any guest records. Large sums, routed through accounts she did not recognize, approved with signatures that looked slightly wrong. She might have dismissed it. Might have assumed it was an accounting error, a miscategorization. But something made her dig deeper. What she found was staggering. Millions of dollars, siphoned over years through shell companies and falsified invoices. A trail of breadcrumbs leading directly to Martin Cross. And worse, a careful construction of evidence designed to eventually point the blame at Douglas himself. Cross was not just stealing. He was building a trap. A framework that would, when triggered, make Douglas appear to be the architect of his own company's destruction. Nora sat alone in her office until midnight, staring at the documents on her screen. Her hands trembled. Her heart raced. She should tell Douglas immediately. Every instinct screamed at her to run to him, to show him what she had found, to warn him of the danger. But she knew her husband. She knew his blind spot where Cross was concerned. She knew that if she came to him with suspicions and preliminary evidence, Cross would explain it away. Cross would make her look paranoid, emotional, motivated by personal dislike rather than facts. And then Cross would cover his tracks. Destroy the evidence. Perhaps accelerate his plans to frame Douglas before anyone could stop him. No. She needed proof. Irrefutable, documented, impossible to dismiss proof. She needed to build the case herself. Raymond Whitfield was a forensic accountant with a reputation for discretion. Nora found him through a lawyer friend who asked no questions, and she paid him from her personal savings, money Douglas did not monitor. The investigation required secrecy. Late-night meetings in coffee shops far from their usual haunts. A separate phone for encrypted communications. A careful dance of normalcy at home while she dismantled her husband's closest friendship in the shadows. The work was exhausting. The double life, draining. But every document Whitfield uncovered strengthened the case. Every thread they pulled revealed more of Cross's elaborate deception. 3 months. That was what Whitfield estimated they needed. 3 months to build a case solid enough to present to federal authorities. Solid enough that Cross could not talk his way out. Solid enough to save Douglas and the company he had built. Nora just had to keep the secret for 3 months. And then she had to figure out how to tell Douglas that she had been right about Cross all along. Had to figure out how to deliver that news without it sounding like an accusation. But that problem could wait. The first priority was gathering the evidence. What Nora did not know was that Douglas had already begun to watch her differently. To notice the late evenings she claimed were work meetings. To observe the way she tensed when her phone buzzed. To feel the distance growing between them even as she assured him everything was fine. He did not say anything. Not at first. But the suspicion had been planted, and it grew in the silence between them like a weed in untended soil. The night everything fell apart began like any other. Douglas came home early from a business dinner. The clients had canceled, and he found himself with an unexpected evening free. He thought he might surprise Nora. Cook dinner together, the way they used to in the early years of their marriage. But Nora was not home. Her car was in the garage. Her briefcase on the kitchen counter. But she was not there. Douglas wandered through the empty house, calling her name. When he reached their bedroom, he noticed her phone on the nightstand. Not her regular phone. A different one. Older. One he had never seen before. He should not have looked. He knew, even as he picked it up, that he was crossing a line. But the suspicion that had been building for weeks demanded answers. The phone was unlocked. The messages were right there. Tomorrow, 9 p.m., same place. This has to stay between us for now. No one else can know. I think about this constantly. We are so close now. Just a little longer. I cannot wait to see you again. Douglas read the messages 3 times. His hands shook. His vision blurred. The sender's name was Raymond. A man he had never heard of. A man his wife was meeting in secret, late at night, begging him to keep their relationship hidden. No. Not his wife. Not Nora. Not the woman who had promised to love him, who had stood beside him, who had built this life with him. He scrolled further. Found records of payments. Large sums from Nora's personal account to this Raymond. Thousands of dollars over several months. She was paying him. Meeting him in secret. telling him that no one else could know. The evidence was irrefutable. The conclusion, obvious. Douglas sat on the edge of their bed, the phone clutched in his hand, and felt his world collapse inward like a dying star. Nora came home an hour later. She found Douglas in the living room, sitting in darkness, the hidden phone on the coffee table between them. Her face went white when she saw it. "Douglas, let me explain." His voice was ice. "Explain what?" "That you have been having an affair. That you have been paying your lover with our money. That you have been sneaking around behind my back while I built you a life most women would kill for." "No. No, that is not what this is." "Douglas, please, just let me tell you." "Tell me what?" He stood, and his voice rose despite his efforts to control it. "Tell me more lies. Tell me another story to cover up what I can see with my own eyes. Those messages are not what you think. Raymond is a forensic accountant. I hired him because—" "A forensic accountant." Douglas laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That is your story. You are paying a man thousands of dollars for secret late-night meetings, and you expect me to believe he is an accountant." "Yes. Because it is the truth. If you would just look at what I have been working on, you would understand. It is about Cross. About what he has been doing to the company. I have proof, Douglas. I have documented everything." Douglas stared at her. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Uncertainty. The possibility that he might be wrong. But then his jaw hardened. His certainty reasserted itself. "You expect me to believe that you have been conducting a secret investigation into my business partner. Without telling me. Without any evidence other than your feelings. I have evidence. I have a folder full of it. Bank records. Transaction logs. Email trails. Cross has been embezzling for years, Douglas. He is planning to frame you." She moved toward her briefcase, desperate to show him, to prove what she could not make him believe with words alone. He stopped her with a raised hand. "Enough. I have heard enough. Douglas, please. I do not want to see whatever you have fabricated to cover your affair. I do not want to hear any more of your explanations." He moved toward the door, then paused without turning around. "I want you out of this house by morning. My lawyers will be in contact about the divorce." Nora felt the words like physical blows. "You are not even going to look at the evidence. You are not even going to give me a chance to explain." Now he turned, and the coldness in his eyes was worse than any anger could have been. "I gave you 7 years of my life. I gave you my trust, my heart, my name. And you repaid me with betrayal. There is nothing more to explain." The door closed behind him. The sound echoed through the empty house. Nora stood alone in the living room, the folder of evidence still in her briefcase, the truth still locked in her heart. He had not listened. He had not looked. He had made his judgment, and nothing she could say would change it. The divorce was swift and brutal. Douglas's lawyers were efficient and ruthless. They offered a settlement that was generous by any objective measure but felt like ashes in Nora's mouth. She took little. She wanted only to be free of the legal entanglement, free of the negotiations, free of the constant reminder of what she had lost. She tried, one final time, to make Douglas see the truth. She sent the complete folder of evidence about Cross to his office, addressed to him personally, marked urgent and confidential. It was returned unopened. She wrote a letter explaining everything. The investigation, the forensic accountant, the proof of Cross's embezzlement. She sent it certified mail. Refused. Returned to sender. Douglas had walled himself off completely. His certainty was absolute. His judgment, final. Nora moved to Vermont, to stay with her sister while she figured out what came next. She left Boston, left the hospitality industry, left everything that reminded her of the life she had built with a man who had destroyed it without ever understanding what he was destroying. And then, 6 weeks after the divorce was finalized, she discovered something that changed everything. She was standing in her sister's bathroom, staring at a small plastic test, watching 2 lines appear where there should have been 1. Pregnant. After years of trying. After countless treatments and disappointments. After they had stopped hoping. Now, when everything had fallen apart. She sat on the cold tile floor and wept. A week later, the doctor confirmed what the test had suggested. But there was more. Triplets, the doctor said, pointing to the ultrasound screen. 3 heartbeats. See them there. Nora stared at the image. 3 small flickers of life. 3 children she had wanted for so long, arriving now, when their father had cast her out without a hearing. The irony was almost too cruel to bear. She wrote one more letter. This time to Douglas directly, not through lawyers. I am pregnant, she wrote. Triplets. They are yours. Whatever you believe about me, whatever you think I did, these children are innocent. They deserve to know their father. She sent it certified mail. She waited. Refused. Returned to sender. He had not even opened it. Had not even glanced at the words that would have changed everything. Nora's sister was outraged. You have to make him listen, she insisted. You have to force him to acknowledge these children. He has responsibilities. He has rights, they have rights. Nora looked at her sister with eyes that had grown older in the months since the divorce. I have tried to make him listen. I have tried everything I know how to try. He does not want to hear me. He has decided what I am, and nothing I say will change his mind. So what are you going to do? I am going to raise my children. I am going to build a life that does not depend on a man who refuses to see me. And if he ever comes looking for them, if he ever decides he wants to know the truth, the door will be open. And if he never comes. Nora placed her hand on her still flat stomach, feeling the impossible miracle growing inside her. Then they will have a mother who loves them enough for 2 parents. And they will never have to wonder whether they are wanted. Ruby, Simon, and Ava were born on a bright March morning, 8 months after the divorce was finalized. Ruby arrived first, red-faced and furious, announcing her presence with a cry that seemed to shake the walls. Simon followed, quieter, his dark eyes already observing the world with what the nurses called an old soul gaze. Ava came last, the smallest of the 3, reaching immediately for contact, for warmth, for connection. They had their father's dark eyes. His stubborn chin. The cowlick in their hair that Nora remembered Douglas fighting every morning with pomade and determination. Looking at them, she could not hate him. Could not even bring herself to resent the years of silence that stretched ahead. These children were made of both of them, and she would not teach them to hate the half of themselves that came from him. She would tell them the truth, when they were old enough to understand. That their father had made a mistake. That he had not been ready to know them. That someday, perhaps, he would find his way to them. Until then, she would be enough. And she was. The first years were brutal. 3 infants, no partner, no family nearby except her sister. Sleepless nights that blurred into exhausted days. The constant juggle of feeding, changing, soothing, and starting the cycle again. But there were moments of grace, too. The first time Ruby laughed, a full belly giggle at nothing Nora could identify. Simon's intense concentration as he examined his own fingers, as if trying to understand how they worked. Ava's first steps, wobbling across the living room into Nora's arms. She built her consulting business from the living room floor, laptop balanced on her knees while babies slept in a fortress of pillows around her. 1 client led to 2, then 5, then more than she could handle alone. She hired help. Expanded. Moved to a real office. By the time the triplets were 3, Callahan Hospitality Consulting was a respected name in the industry. By the time they were 5, it was one of the most sought-after firms on the East Coast. Nora had built something remarkable from the ashes of her old life. Not to prove anything to Douglas. Not to demonstrate her worth. Simply because building was what she knew how to do. And meanwhile, in New York and London and a dozen other cities around the world, Douglas Aldrich continued to build his own empire, never knowing that 3 children with his face were growing up without him. The news about Martin Cross broke 3 years after the divorce. Federal investigators had uncovered what Nora had discovered years earlier. The embezzlement. The fraud. The elaborate scheme to eventually pin the blame on Douglas. Cross was arrested, tried, and convicted. He was currently serving 12 years in federal prison. Nora read the news coverage with a strange mixture of vindication and exhaustion. She had been right. She had always been right. And Douglas had destroyed their marriage rather than consider the possibility that he might be wrong. She wondered if he understood now. If he had looked back at her warnings, her concerns, her attempts to make him see. If he had realized what her secret investigation had really been about. She did not reach out to ask. What would be the point? The damage was done. The years were lost. 3 children were growing up without their father, and no amount of belated understanding could give that time back. But Douglas did understand. Eventually, he learned the truth in pieces, as the trial revealed the scope of Cross's betrayal. He learned that the forensic accountant was real, that the investigation was real, that everything Nora had tried to tell him had been true. He went back through old files and found the folder she had sent, the one he had ordered destroyed without reading. His assistant had disobeyed, had kept a copy just in case. He read it now, years too late, and saw the meticulous documentation of Cross's crimes. Saw the evidence that would have saved the company years of damage. Saw the proof that his wife had been trying to protect him, not betray him. He tried to call her sister. The conversation was brief and brutal. "She has moved on," the sister said. "She has built a life. A good life. She does not need you disrupting it now. I need to apologize. I need to explain." "Explain what?" "That you were wrong. She already knows that. She always knew it. Then I need to tell her that I know it." The sister was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that stayed with Douglas long after the call ended. "You had your chance to listen, Douglas. You chose not to take it. She is not obligated to listen to you now." The phone went dead, and Douglas was left alone with the weight of his own certainty, finally revealed for what it truly was. Cowardice dressed up as conviction. Pride masquerading as principle. He had been so sure. And his sureness had cost him everything. But he did not know, in that moment, just how much everything truly meant. The plane was halfway across the Atlantic when Douglas finally broke the silence that had settled between them. "I know I was wrong." Nora looked up from the window, where she had been watching the endless expanse of clouds below. "Excuse me. About Cross. About the investigation. About all of it." He gripped his Scotch glass, though it had been empty for an hour. "I know you were trying to protect me. I know Raymond Whitfield was an accountant. I know everything you told me that night was true." Nora studied him. Her expression was unreadable. "How long have you known?" 3 years. "Since Cross was arrested. I went back through the evidence. I read the files you tried to give me. The files you had destroyed without reading." He flinched. "Yes. And it took you 3 years to tell me you were wrong. 3 years of knowing the truth. I tried to reach you. I called your sister. She said you had moved on. That you did not want to hear from me." Nora was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that cut deeper than any accusation could have. "My sister was right. I had moved on. I had to. There was no other way to survive what you did." Douglas felt the words land. Felt their weight settle on his shoulders. "I am sorry. I know it is not enough. I know years of sorry cannot make up for what I did. But I am sorry, Nora. For not listening. For not trusting you. For destroying everything we built together." She looked at him for a long moment. And when she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. "I believe you. I believe you are sorry. But sorry does not give back what was lost. It does not erase 7 years of silence. It does not undo the damage done. Then what does? Nothing. That is what you have to learn to live with. Some things, once broken, cannot be repaired. They can only be mourned." The plane hummed around them. The silence stretched. Then Douglas asked the question that had been forming in his mind since the conversation began. "What did you lose, Nora? What damage are you talking about?" Your career seems to have recovered. Your consulting firm is one of the best in the industry. You seem to have built something remarkable without me." Nora's expression flickered. Something passed across her face. Pain, quickly suppressed. A decision being made. "There is something you do not know," she said slowly. "Something I tried to tell you. Something you refused to hear." "What are you talking about?" She looked at him directly. Her eyes held 7 years of silence, 7 years of secrets, 7 years of raising 3 children alone while their father built an empire on the other side of his certainty. "You will find out soon enough. When we land. And then you will understand exactly what your refusal to listen cost you." "Nora, what are you not telling me?" But she had already turned back to the window. The conversation was over. Douglas sat in the growing darkness of the cabin, watching the woman who had once been his wife, feeling the ground shift beneath a certainty that had sustained him for 7 years. What truth had he been so determined not to hear? What revelation was waiting for him on the ground in Boston? And why did Nora look at him now, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with something that looked almost like pity? The plane began its descent. The city lights of Boston emerged from the clouds below. And Douglas Aldrich, who had spent 7 years believing he knew exactly what had happened to his marriage, was about to discover that he knew nothing at all. Some truths cannot be told. They can only be witnessed. Some consequences cannot be described. They can only be felt. And some revelations do not arrive through words, but through small faces looking up at you with your own eyes, asking questions you do not know how to answer. Douglas did not know it yet, but his entire world was about to change. Not through argument or explanation, but through the simple, devastating power of presence. 3 children were waiting on a tarmac, and their father was finally coming home. The plane touched down with a slight shudder, wheels meeting tarmac, engines reversing to slow the massive aircraft. Around them, passengers began the familiar ritual of gathering belongings, checking phones, preparing to return to lives that had continued without them during the hours in the air. Douglas remained seated, watching Nora. She was texting someone, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. Her expression had shifted during the descent. The careful composure she had maintained throughout the flight had given way to something else. Anticipation, perhaps. Or apprehension. "Who are you texting?" he asked. "Someone who is meeting me." "That is not an answer." "No." She looked up from her phone. "It is not." The passengers around them began filing toward the exit. Still, neither of them moved. "Nora, whatever you are not telling me. Whatever secret you have been keeping. I need to know." She studied him for a long moment. Her eyes held something he could not quite read. Sadness, perhaps. Or resignation. "You will know," she said quietly. "In about 5 minutes, you will know everything. And then we will see if you still want to talk." She stood, gathered her carry-on bag, and joined the stream of passengers moving toward the door. Douglas followed, his heart pounding with an anxiety he could not explain. Something was waiting for him. Something that would change everything. He just did not know what. The terminal was crowded with the usual chaos of an international arrivals hall. Families reuniting. Business travelers striding toward ground transportation. Tour groups clustering around guides holding signs. Douglas kept his eyes on Nora as she navigated through the crowd. She moved with purpose, clearly heading somewhere specific. Clearly expecting someone. They passed through customs, collected her checked luggage, and emerged into the arrivals hall. Douglas's driver would be waiting outside, holding a sign with his name. But he found himself following Nora instead, drawn by the mystery of what she had refused to tell him. They stepped through the automatic doors into the cool October afternoon. The pickup area was busy with cars and shuttles and people loading luggage. And then Douglas saw the Bentley. It was parked at the curb, gleaming black, obviously waiting. A woman in her 50s stood beside it. Professional. Composed. Clearly some kind of household staff. But it was not the woman who stopped Douglas in his tracks. It was what happened when the rear doors of the Bentley opened. 3 children spilled out of the car. They were identical in their energy, different in their approach. The first, a girl in a red jacket, ran ahead of the others, her dark hair flying behind her. The second, a boy, hung back slightly, a book clutched under his arm, his eyes taking in everything around him. The third, another girl, bounced between her siblings, her face bright with excitement. "Mommy." The word echoed across the pickup area. 3 voices, slightly out of sync, all calling for the same person. Nora dropped to her knees on the concrete, her arms opening wide. The children crashed into her like waves against a shore, all talking at once, all demanding attention, all radiating a joy that seemed to light up the gray October afternoon. Douglas stood frozen. The children's faces, their dark eyes, the stubborn set of their jaws, the cowlick in the boy's hair, fighting against whatever product had been used to tame it. He knew those features. He saw them every morning in the mirror. "Mommy," the bold girl was saying, "we made cookies with Margaret while you were gone. I put extra chocolate chips in mine. I finished my book," the boy added quietly. "The one about the astronaut. Can we go to the library tomorrow?" "I missed you so much," the third child said, wrapping her arms around Nora's neck. It felt like forever. Nora held all 3 of them, her face transformed by a love Douglas had never seen during their marriage. This was not the composed, careful woman he had known. This was someone else entirely. Someone softer. Someone complete. 3 children. Triplets. 6 years old. The math crashed through Douglas's mind like a wrecking ball through glass. 6 years old. Born 8 months after their divorce was finalized. Conceived before everything fell apart. His children. His children, whom he had never known existed. His children, whom Nora had raised alone for 6 years while he built his empire on the foundation of his own righteous certainty. Nora. His voice came out strangled, barely audible above the noise of the pickup area. She looked up at him. Her expression held no triumph, no satisfaction, only the quiet acknowledgement of a truth finally revealed. "Mommy," the bold girl said, noticing Douglas for the first time. "Who is that man? Why is he staring at us?" Nora straightened, her hand resting protectively on her daughter's shoulder. "This is someone Mommy knew a long time ago." The boy studied Douglas with an intensity that was unsettling in one so young. His dark eyes seemed to see everything, understand everything. "He has eyes like us," the boy observed quietly. The words hung in the air. Douglas felt his legs weaken. He reached for the nearest solid object, the side of a parked car, to steady himself. "Nora." His voice cracked. "What is this? What have you? Not here." Her voice was firm but not unkind. "Not in front of them. They are mine." It was not a question. He could see the answer in their faces, in every line and curve that echoed his own. "Yes." "Why did you not tell me?" "I tried." 3 words. 3 words that carried the weight of 7 years of silence. "I tried." The bold girl tugged at Nora's sleeve. "Mommy, he looks sick. Is he okay?" "He is fine, sweetheart. He is just surprised." Douglas forced himself to focus, to breathe, to behave like a rational human being instead of a man whose entire world had just collapsed and rebuilt itself in the span of 30 seconds. He looked at the children. His children. 3 small faces looking up at him with curiosity and caution. "What are your names?" he managed to ask. The bold girl stepped forward, unafraid. "I am Ruby. I am 6 3/4. These are my brother and sister, Simon and Ava. We are triplets." Triplets. The word echoed in his mind. Triplets. 3 children. 3 lives he had missed entirely. Ava, the gentle one, moved toward him. "Are you coming to dinner with us? Mommy said she might have a visitor tonight." Nora intercepted the question before Douglas could respond. "Not tonight, sweetheart, but maybe soon." She turned to Douglas, her expression resolute. "I have a house outside the city. Come tomorrow evening. 7 o'clock. I will text you the address." She began guiding the children toward the Bentley. The woman Douglas assumed was their nanny helped load the luggage. Wait, Douglas said. Nora, wait. You cannot just. Tomorrow, she said, not unkindly. There is too much to explain, and this is not the place. Come tomorrow, and I will tell you everything. The children climbed into the Bentley. The doors closed. Through the tinted windows, Douglas could see 3 small faces watching him. His children. His children, driving away. The Bentley pulled from the curb and merged into traffic. Within moments, it had disappeared. Douglas stood alone on the sidewalk, surrounded by the ordinary chaos of an airport pickup area, feeling as though the ground had opened beneath his feet and swallowed everything he thought he knew about his life. His driver had appeared beside him, professional concern evident in his voice. "Sir, are you all right? Should I call someone?" Douglas shook his head slowly. He was not all right. He would never be all right again. Not in the way he had been before. But he did not say that. Instead, he said the only words that seemed to make sense. "Take me to my hotel. I need to think." He climbed into the waiting car and stared out the window as Boston slid past. The city looked different now. Everything looked different. Because everything was different. He had 3 children. And he had missed 6 years of their lives because he had been too certain, too proud, too convinced of his own righteous judgment to open a letter from the woman who was trying to tell him the truth. The hotel room was luxurious, as all of Douglas's accommodations were. A corner suite with views of the harbor. Fresh flowers on the table. A fully stocked bar. He ignored all of it. Instead, he sat on the edge of the bed and called his assistant. "I need you to find everything you can about Nora Callahan's life for the past 7 years. Specifically anything related to children. Birth records. School enrollments. Medical records if you can get them." "Sir," his assistant said carefully, "some of that information might be difficult to obtain legally." "I do not care about difficult. I care about truth. Find it." He ended the call and sat in the growing darkness, watching the lights of the city flicker on one by one. 3 children. Ruby. Simon. Ava. His children. The weight of it was almost too much to bear. He thought about the letter. The one Nora had sent after the divorce. The one that had arrived certified mail from Vermont. The one he had refused without reading. What had it said? What words had been waiting for him? Words that would have changed everything if only he had been willing to receive them. "I am pregnant." That was what she had written. He was certain of it now. "I am pregnant. Triplets. They are yours." And he had sent it back. Had refused to even look at the envelope. Had been so certain of her betrayal that he could not imagine any communication from her that was worth reading. 7 years. 7 years of birthday parties and first steps and bedtime stories and scraped knees and childhood illnesses and school plays and all the 1,000 small moments that make up a life. 7 years of his children growing up without him. Because he had been too proud to open a letter. Douglas poured himself a scotch and drank it in one swallow. Then he poured another. It did not help. Nothing would help. He had done this to himself. And now he had to figure out how to live with it. The next evening, Douglas's car pulled up to a gracious colonial house on a tree-lined street outside the city. It was not extravagant. Not the kind of property he would have expected from the CEO of a successful consulting firm. But it was warm, welcoming. The kind of house that looked like a home rather than a statement. Evidence of children was everywhere. A bicycle leaning against the porch railing. Chalk drawings on the driveway, faded by recent rain but still visible. A swing hanging from the large oak tree in the front yard. Douglas sat in the car for a full minute, staring at the house where his children lived. His children. The words still felt foreign in his mind. Impossible. And yet undeniably true. Finally, he stepped out of the car and walked to the front door. The woman from the airport, Margaret, opened it before he could knock. "Mr. Aldridge, please come in. Ms. Callahan is expecting you." She led him through a foyer cluttered with small shoes and backpacks, past a living room strewn with toys and books, to a study at the back of the house. The door was closed. "The children are already in bed," Margaret said. Ms. Callahan thought it would be better if your conversation happened privately. Douglas nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Margaret opened the door and stepped aside. Nora was waiting inside. She sat in a leather armchair, a glass of wine on the table beside her. She looked tired but composed, ready for whatever was about to happen. "Douglas," she said, "please, sit down." He took the chair across from her. The distance between them felt both too small and impossibly vast. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Douglas said the only thing he could think to say. "Tell me everything." And Nora did. She told him about discovering the pregnancy 6 weeks after the divorce was finalized. About the shock, the terror, the impossible joy of learning she was carrying triplets after years of believing she could not have children. She told him about the letter she had written. The letter explaining everything. The letter he had refused without reading. She told him about the decision she had made. To raise the children alone rather than chase a man who had made clear he wanted nothing from her. To protect them from the possibility of rejection by a father who might not believe they were his. She told him about the birth. The early years. The sleepless nights and the first words and the first steps. The building of her business from the living room floor while 3 infants slept in a fortress of pillows around her. She told him about what she had told the children about their father. That he had not been ready to be a daddy when they were born. That he had made some mistakes. That someday, perhaps, he might come looking for them. She told him about the years of silence. The birthdays and holidays and ordinary Tuesdays that he had missed. The thousands of small moments that could never be reclaimed. And through it all, Douglas listened. He did not interrupt. He did not defend himself. He did not explain or excuse or justify. He simply listened to the story of 6 years of his children's lives. Lives that had happened without him. Lives that had been full and rich and complete without his presence. When she finished, the silence stretched between them. Finally, Douglas spoke. "The letter. The one I refused. What exactly did it say?" Nora rose and walked to a bookshelf. She pulled out a folder, yellowed with age, and handed it to him. "I kept a copy." Douglas opened the folder with trembling hands. The letter was handwritten. Nora's careful script, slightly unsteady in places. Evidence of the emotion behind the words. "Dear Douglas, I know you do not want to hear from me. I know you believe you know the truth about what happened between us. I am not writing to argue with you or to try to change your mind. I am writing because you have a right to know something, whether or not you choose to believe it. I am pregnant. Triplets. The doctors say it is a miracle, after all our years of trying. They are due in March. They are yours. There has never been anyone else. I know you do not believe that, and I do not expect this letter to convince you. But someday, when they are born, you will be able to see the truth in their faces. I am not asking you for money or support or involvement. If you want nothing to do with us, I will respect that choice. I will raise our children alone, and I will not poison them against you. But if you ever want to know them, if you ever want to be their father, the door will be open. I loved you, Douglas. I still love you. And I am sorry for whatever I did or did not do that made it impossible for you to trust me. Nora." Douglas read the letter 3 times. Then he set it down on the table between them and put his head in his hands. Nora watched him silently. "I refuse this," he said finally, his voice muffled. "I refuse this without reading it." "Yes. You told me you were pregnant. You told me they were mine. You offered me the chance to be their father. And I sent it back unopened." "Yes." He looked up at her. His eyes were red. "Why? Why did you not try harder? Why did you not make me listen?" Nora's expression was patient but firm. "How was I supposed to do that, Douglas? I had already tried everything. I had shown you evidence you refused to look at. I had offered explanations you refused to hear. I had sent letters you refused to open." She leaned forward slightly, her voice quiet but unyielding. "At some point, a woman has to ask herself a question. Am I going to spend my life chasing a man who will not hear me? Or am I going to build a life that does not depend on his willingness to listen? And you chose to build. I chose to survive. I chose to protect my children from a father who might reject them. I chose to create a home where they would never have to wonder if they were wanted. Douglas absorbed this. You were protecting them from me. I was protecting them from the man you were then. A man who was so certain he was right that he could not imagine being wrong. A man who would rather destroy his marriage than consider the possibility that he had misjudged his wife. She paused, then added more gently, I do not know if you are still that man. That is what we are about to find out. Douglas was quiet for a long moment. What are they like? He asked finally. The children. Ruby and Simon and Ava. What are they like? Nora's expression softened. Ruby is fierce. She was born first, and she has never forgotten it. She protects her siblings, speaks her mind, and has absolutely no patience for anything she considers unfair. She reminds me of you, actually. The you that you used to be, before you became so certain about everything. And Simon. Simon is an observer. He hangs back, watches everything, processes it internally before he speaks. He loves books, especially stories about space and exploration. He is sensitive in ways that he tries to hide because he thinks sensitivity is weakness. Ava. Ava is the peacemaker. She feels everything, everyone's emotions, everyone's needs. She is the one who notices when someone is sad, who offers comfort before it is asked for. She will walk right up to strangers and start conversations because she assumes everyone in the world is fundamentally kind. Nora smiled slightly. She gets that from me, I think. The naive belief that if you are just good enough, honest enough, kind enough, people will respond in kind. Douglas heard the implication. The reminder that her belief in his fundamental decency had been her downfall. What have you told them about me? He asked. The truth. That their father was not ready to be a daddy when they were born. That he made some mistakes. That someday, if he ever came looking for them, we would see if he was ready. You did not tell them I abandoned them. You did not abandon them, Douglas. You did not know about them. That is different. I will not teach my children to hate a father they have never met. She paused. But I also will not pretend you were a victim. The silence stretched between them. Douglas looked around the study. At the bookshelves filled with children's books alongside business texts. At the framed photographs on the wall. 3 children at various ages. Birthday parties and beach vacations and ordinary moments of childhood. 6 years of photographs he was not in. What do I do now? He asked finally. How do I become their father after all this time? Nora considered the question carefully. Slowly, she said. Carefully. On their terms, not yours. What does that mean? It means you cannot walk into their lives and announce that you are their father and expect them to accept you immediately. They do not know you. To them, you are a stranger. A stranger who happens to share their DNA. So what do I do? You spend time with them. You let them get to know you gradually. You show up consistently, not just when it is convenient for you. You earn their trust. How long will that take? I do not know. It might take months. It might take years. There is no shortcut, Douglas. You cannot close this deal with a handshake and a signing bonus. He flinched at the comparison, but he could not deny its accuracy. And what about my work? My company? Everything is based in New York. Nora's expression was neutral. That is your problem to solve. I am not going to tell you how to restructure your life. You are a grown man. If you want to be part of your children's lives, you will figure out how to make that possible. Douglas nodded slowly. The reality of the situation was becoming clearer. He was not in control here. He could not dictate terms or set conditions. He was a supplicant, asking for the chance to know his own children. And what about us? He asked finally. Is there any possibility that we could? No. The word was gentle but absolute. Douglas, the woman you were married to is gone. I am someone else now. Someone who built a life without you. Someone who does not need you. I am not asking if you need me. I am asking if there is any chance of starting over. We cannot start over. The children are 6 years old. That time is gone. We cannot pretend those years did not happen. So that is it. No second chance. Nora looked at him with something that might have been compassion. There is a chance, she said. Not for a romantic reconciliation, but for something else. The chance to be co-parents. The chance to build a relationship with your children. The chance, maybe eventually, to be friends. She paused. But even that chance depends on you, Douglas. On whether you are really willing to change. On whether you can show up consistently without trying to control everything. On whether you can put their needs above your own. Douglas absorbed this. You do not think I can do it. I do not know if you can do it. That is what we are about to find out. She stood, signaling that the conversation was nearing its end. Come back on Saturday. 2 o'clock. You can spend the afternoon with them. We will see how it goes. Douglas stood as well. Thank you, he said, for giving me this chance. I am not giving you anything. Nora's voice was firm but not unkind. You had a right to know your children exist. Now you know. What happens next is up to you. She walked him to the door. In the hallway, Douglas paused. Nora. Yes. I am sorry. For all of it. For not listening. For not trusting you. For refusing your letter. For 7 years of your life that I cannot give back. She looked at him for a long moment. I know you are sorry. And I believe you mean it. Does it matter? Does the apology mean anything? It means you finally understand what you did. That is something. But it does not fix anything. No. She opened the front door. It does not fix anything. But it is a place to start. Douglas stepped out into the cool evening air. Behind him, the door closed softly. He stood on the porch for a long moment, looking at the chalk drawings on the driveway. A family. 4 figures, not 3. 2 adults, 2 children, with a third figure slightly to the side, as if recently added. Had Ava drawn that? Had she added a father to the picture before she even knew she had one? The thought was almost too painful to bear. Douglas walked to his car, climbed inside, and sat in the darkness for a long time before finally starting the engine. Saturday came slowly and quickly at the same time. Douglas spent the intervening days on the phone with his assistant, his lawyers, his board of directors. He was reorganizing his life. Opening a Boston office. Delegating responsibilities that he had never trusted anyone else to handle. Making arrangements to spend significant time on the East Coast. His CFO expressed concern about the sudden changes. Douglas, is everything all right? This is very unlike you. Everything is fine, Douglas replied. I am just re-evaluating my priorities. He did not elaborate. There would be time for explanations later. For now, he needed to focus on Saturday. The afternoon arrived. Douglas stood on Nora's front porch again, this time in casual clothes rather than a business suit. He had agonized over what to wear for nearly an hour. How did one dress to meet one's children for the first time? Nora answered the door. They are in the backyard. She stepped aside to let him in. Try not to overwhelm them. Let them come to you. She led him through the house to the back door. Through the glass, Douglas could see 3 children playing on a wooden play structure. Ruby was climbing the highest point, fearless. Simon sat on a lower platform, reading. Ava was making her way across a rope bridge, humming to herself. Ready? Nora asked. No, Douglas admitted. But I do not think I ever will be. He stepped outside. The children noticed him immediately. Ruby stopped climbing and watched him with suspicious eyes. Simon looked up from his book, his expression unreadable. Ava waved enthusiastically. Hi, Ava called. You are the man from the airport. Yes, Douglas said, approaching slowly. My name is Douglas. Your mother said I could come play with you today. Ruby climbed down from her perch, positioning herself slightly in front of her siblings. The protective instinct was unmistakable. Why? She asked bluntly. Douglas considered the question. Because I would like to get to know you, he said honestly. If that is all right with you. Ruby studied him with an intensity that was unnerving in a 6-year-old. Mommy said you knew her a long time ago. Yes. A long time ago. Were you friends? We were. Very good friends. What happened? Douglas glanced at Nora, who was watching from the doorway. I made some mistakes, he said, turning back to Ruby. I was not a very good friend. Ruby considered this. Are you a good friend now? Douglas felt the weight of the question. The weight of his entire future relationship with his children, balanced on the answer he gave to a 6-year-old. I am trying to be, he said. I am still learning. Ruby nodded slowly. This answer seemed to satisfy her, at least for the moment. Do you know how to push someone on the swings? She asked. I think I can figure it out. Ruby walked toward the swing set, glancing back to make sure he was following. It was not an invitation exactly. More of a test. Douglas followed. For the next 2 hours, he pushed swings and admired climbing feats and discussed the relative merits of different dinosaurs with Ruby. He looked at Simon's book and asked genuine questions about the astronaut story. He let Ava show him her collection of rocks, each one with a name and a personality. It was awkward. He made mistakes. He pushed too hard at moments, retreated too far at others. He did not know the rhythms of childhood, the ebb and flow of attention that children required. But he was present. Fully present. For the first time in years, he was not thinking about quarterly reports or investor meetings or the endless demands of his company. He was thinking about 3 children who were looking at him with cautious curiosity. 3 children who might, if he proved worthy, come to accept him as their father. When Margaret called the children in for dinner, Ruby paused at the back door. Are you coming back? She asked. Douglas looked at Nora, who gave a slight nod. If it is all right with you, he said to Ruby. I would like to come back on Saturday. Ruby considered this. You could come Wednesday too, she said. That is pizza night. But only if you like pepperoni. Simon does not like pepperoni, but he is weird. I like pepperoni, Douglas said. Okay then, Ruby said, as if the matter was settled. She disappeared into the house, her siblings following. Douglas stood in the empty backyard, feeling something he had not felt in years. Hope. The weeks that followed were the most difficult and the most rewarding of Douglas's life. He came every Wednesday for pizza night, every Saturday for afternoon visits. He learned the rhythms of the household, the bedtime routines, the particular preferences of each child. Ruby liked stories about brave girls who saved themselves. Simon liked anything involving space or science. Ava liked stories where everyone ended up happy, no matter how implausible. He learned that Simon had nightmares sometimes and could only be soothed by a specific stuffed elephant named Professor Trunk. He learned that Ava was afraid of thunderstorms and liked to build blanket forts to hide in when the weather turned. He learned that Ruby pretended to be fearless but secretly kept a nightlight on in her room. He learned what it meant to be a parent. The exhaustion of constant attention. The terror of childhood illnesses. The profound joy of a small hand reaching for his without thinking. It was not easy. There were setbacks. Moments when the children pulled away, reminded of his strangeness, his newness in their lives. Moments when Ruby tested him, pushed boundaries, demanded to know why he had not been there before. I made mistakes, he told her each time. I was not ready to be a father. I am trying to be ready now. Ruby would study him with those 2 wise eyes. Trying is not the same as being. I know, Douglas would reply. But trying is where being starts. 6 weeks after that first Saturday, Douglas made a decision. He bought a house. It was 3 streets away from Nora's. A comfortable colonial, smaller than anything he had lived in since his 20s. 4 bedrooms. A backyard with room for a swing set. When he showed Nora the property, her expression was carefully neutral. You are serious about this? I have never been more serious about anything in my life. She nodded slowly. The children will be happy. They have been asking when you are getting a house with a room for them. Douglas felt something ease in his chest. They want rooms here. Ava has already planned the decorating. She wants purple walls and a canopy bed. Ruby wants a climbing wall. Simon wants a reading nook. Douglas smiled. A real smile. One that felt unfamiliar on his face. They can have whatever they want. Nora's expression shifted slightly. A warning. That is not how parenting works, Douglas. You cannot buy their affection. You cannot give them everything they want and call it love. I know that. Do you? He considered the question seriously. I am learning, he said finally. I know I have a tendency to solve problems by throwing resources at them. I know that will not work with children. But I am learning. Nora studied him for a long moment. You are, she admitted. You really are. The winter passed. The children grew more comfortable with Douglas's presence. Ruby stopped testing him quite so aggressively. Simon started sharing his books without being asked. Ava began running to him for hugs when he arrived. One evening in February, Douglas was reading bedtime stories. Ruby and Ava had already fallen asleep, but Simon remained awake, his dark eyes fixed on Douglas's face. "Can I ask you something?" Simon said quietly. "Anything. Mommy said you are our father. Our real father." Douglas set down the book. He had known this conversation was coming. He had prepared for it. But nothing could truly prepare a man for this moment. "Yes, I am." "Why did you not come before?" Douglas considered his answer carefully. He would not lie to his children. He had done enough damage with certainty and assumption. The truth, however painful, was the only way forward. "I made a mistake," he said. "A very big mistake. I did not listen when your mother tried to tell me something important. And because I did not listen, I did not know you existed until a few months ago." Simon absorbed this. "You did not know about us." "No. I did not know. But Mommy tried to tell you." "Yes. She tried very hard. I was not willing to listen." "Why not?" Douglas felt the weight of the question. The weight of explaining to a 6-year-old the failures of a grown man. "Because I was angry. And I was proud. And I thought I knew everything, when really I knew nothing at all." Simon nodded slowly. "That sounds like a mistake. It was the worst mistake of my life." The boy was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that Douglas would remember for the rest of his days. "You are here now, though. That has to count for something." Douglas felt tears prick at his eyes. "I hope so," he said. "I hope it counts for something." Simon reached out and patted Douglas's hand. A small gesture of comfort from a child who should not have had to offer comfort. "I think it does," Simon said. "Mommy always says that showing up is the most important thing. And you have been showing up a lot." Douglas could not speak. He simply nodded and held his son's small hand until Simon's eyes finally closed. That night, Douglas sat on Nora's porch, looking up at the stars. She joined him after checking on the children, lowering herself into the chair beside his. "Simon talked to you," she said. "He told me." Douglas nodded. "He asked why I was not there before." "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That I made a mistake. That I did not listen. That it was the worst mistake of my life." Nora was quiet for a moment. "That was the right thing to say." "Was it?" "Sometimes I wonder if I should tell them more. Tell them the whole story. They are 6, Douglas. They will understand more as they get older. For now, they need to know that you made a mistake and you are trying to fix it. That is enough." "Will it ever be enough?" Douglas asked quietly. "Will anything I do ever make up for those 6 years?" Nora turned to look at him. Her expression was honest. Not cruel, not comforting. Simply honest. "No," she said. "Nothing will give back those years. You will always be the father who was not there for their first steps. Their first words. Their first day of school. Their first everything." She paused. "But you can be the father who is there for everything that comes next. And if you keep showing up, if you keep being present, eventually those future memories will outweigh the past ones." Douglas absorbed this. You really believe that? I believe it is possible. I have seen you change, Douglas. I have seen you put their needs ahead of your own. I have seen you cancel business calls to attend school plays. I have seen you learn to braid hair and make grilled cheese sandwiches and sit through princess movies without checking your phone. She smiled slightly. That is not the man I was married to. That man would never have made it through a single viewing of Frozen without answering emails. That man was a fool, Douglas said quietly. Yes, he was. But perhaps that man had to exist so that this man could learn to be better. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Douglas asked the question that had been forming in his mind for weeks. Do you think we will ever be friends? Real friends. Not just co-parents. Nora considered the question. I think we are already becoming friends, she said. Not the kind of friends we were before. That relationship is gone. But a new kind. The kind that grows from shared purpose and mutual respect. Is that enough for you? She looked at him with something that might have been fondness. It is more than I expected. When you sat down next to me on that plane, I thought you were going to make the next 12 hours of my life miserable. I never imagined we would end up here. Neither did I. They sat together as the stars wheeled overhead, two people who had once been everything to each other, now learning to be something new. Spring arrived. Ruby's 7th birthday approached. Douglas threw himself into the planning with an enthusiasm that surprised even himself. He rented a venue, hired entertainers, ordered a cake in the shape of a dragon, Ruby's latest obsession. Nora watched his preparations with a mixture of amusement and concern. You know the party does not have to be perfect, she said. She is turning 7, not being crowned queen. I want it to be special. It will be special because you are there. The decorations are secondary. Douglas paused in his review of balloon color options. Am I overdoing it? You are overdoing it. He set down the catalog. I do not know how to do this, he admitted. I missed 6 birthdays. Part of me wants to make up for all of them at once. You cannot make up for them. They happened without you. All you can do is be present for this one and the ones that come after. Douglas nodded slowly. Smaller party then. Much smaller. Just family and a few friends from school. A cake. Some games. That is all she needs. And what she wants. What she wants is for you to be there. Everything else is extra. The party was small. Intimate. Ruby blew out her candles with her family around her. Father, mother, brother, sister. The kind of ordinary moment that Douglas had once taken for granted. Now he understood how precious ordinary moments could be. After the party, after the children had been put to bed and the decorations cleared away, Douglas sat in his new living room surrounded by moving boxes he had not yet unpacked. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. Board meeting tomorrow. Quarterly results. Your presence required in New York. Douglas looked at the message for a long moment. Then he typed a response. Handle it without me. I have prior commitments. He set the phone aside and looked around his half-furnished house. Tomorrow, Simon had a school presentation about the solar system. Ruby had a soccer game. Ava had a playdate that she had been talking about for weeks. These were his prior commitments now. These were the things that mattered. His phone buzzed again. His assistant, surprised. Sir, the investors will expect you to be there. Douglas typed his reply. Then they will learn to adjust their expectations. I have 3 children who are expecting me to be here. They take priority. He turned off his phone and went to bed. The following weeks brought their own challenges. Ruby, testing boundaries, announced at dinner one evening that she did not have to listen to Douglas because he was not her real father. The words cut deep. Deeper than Douglas could have anticipated. Nora started to intervene, but Douglas held up a hand. You are right, he said quietly. I was not here when you were born. I was not here for your first steps or your first words. In that sense, I am not the father I should have been. Ruby looked surprised. She had expected an argument, not agreement. But I am here now, Douglas continued, and I am trying to learn how to be a good father. I will probably make mistakes. I will probably get things wrong. But I will keep trying. And I will keep showing up. Because that is what fathers do. Ruby was silent for a moment. Real fathers show up, she said, testing the idea. Real fathers show up, Douglas agreed. And I am going to keep showing up for you. Even when you are angry at me. Even when you wish I would go away. Because that is what love looks like. Ruby considered this. Okay, she said finally. But you still cannot tell me what to do about vegetables. Douglas smiled. Fair enough. But your mother can. Ruby groaned, but Douglas caught a small smile at the corner of her mouth. They were going to be all right. A year passed. Then 2. Douglas's relationship with his children deepened and matured. The early awkwardness gave way to genuine connection. Ruby still challenged him regularly, but now it was the kind of challenge that came from security rather than suspicion. Simon began seeking Douglas out for conversations about books and science. Ava attached herself to him with the unquestioning affection that children offer to those who have earned their trust. He learned to braid hair, to cook meals that 3 children would actually eat, to sit through animated movies without checking his phone, to be present in a way he had never been present for anything in his life. His company survived his absence, thrived, even. The team he had built proved capable of handling more than he had ever given them credit for. He spent 3 days a week in New York, handling essential business. The rest of his time belonged to his children. It was not the life he had planned. It was not the life he had imagined. It was better. One evening, 3 years after the day on the tarmac, Douglas and Nora sat on her porch watching their children play in the fading light. Ruby was 9 now, fierce and confident, already talking about becoming a marine biologist or possibly a professional rock climber. Simon, at 9, had the thoughtful disposition of a scholar, his nose always in a book. Ava, sweet Ava, remained the peacemaker, the one who smoothed over sibling arguments and made sure everyone felt included. They were extraordinary children. And Douglas got to be their father. "Do you ever think about what might have been?" he asked Nora. "If I had listened. If I had read your letter. If we had raised them together from the beginning." Nora considered the question. "Sometimes," she said, "but not as much as I used to. What might have been is not real. This is real. These children. This life we have built. This is what matters." Douglas nodded. "I spent so many years being certain about everything," he said. "Certain I was right. Certain you were wrong. Certain that my judgment was sound and my conclusions correct. And now I am certain of almost nothing, except that I love those 3 children more than I have ever loved anything, and that I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of them." Nora smiled. "That sounds like growth. It sounds like wisdom I should have had 20 years ago. You were not ready for wisdom 20 years ago. You had to become the man you were. And then you had to let that man go so you could become this one. Is this one better?" Nora looked at him. Really looked. Seeing him clearly, perhaps, for the first time. "This one is present," she said. "This one shows up. This one puts his children first. So yes, this one is better." Douglas felt something settle in his chest. Not absolution. He would never fully absolve himself for the years he had missed. But acceptance, perhaps. The recognition that he could not change the past, only shape the future. "Thank you," he said, "for giving me this chance. For letting me be their father." "You earned it," Nora replied. "Every Saturday visit. Every Wednesday pizza night. Every bedtime story and school play and scraped knee. You showed up. Consistently. Without fail. That is what earned their trust. And mine." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged one by one. 3 children were growing up. 2 parents were learning to raise them together. Not as husband and wife. Not as the people they had once been. But as something new. Something forged from the wreckage of what they had destroyed. It was not a fairy tale ending. There was no romantic reconciliation. No triumphant reunion. Just the quiet, ordinary miracle of people doing the hard work of becoming better. Some stories end with happily ever after. This one ends with something more difficult and more rare. It ends with a man who finally learned to listen. With a woman who finally let go of what she had lost. With 3 children who grew up knowing that their father loved them. That he would always show up. That even though he had made terrible mistakes, he had spent every day of their lives trying to be worthy of them. That is not a fairy tale. It is something better. It is real. It is difficult. It is true. And sometimes, that is exactly enough. The lights of the house glowed warm behind them. Inside, 3 children were getting ready for bed. Soon, Douglas would go in to read them stories. Soon, he would tuck them in and kiss their foreheads and tell them he loved them. But for now, he sat beside the mother of his children, looking up at the stars, grateful for every ordinary moment. Some lessons come too late to prevent the damage. But they are never too late to build something new. That is the truth Douglas Aldrich learned on a tarmac in Boston, watching 3 children with his own eyes climb out of a waiting Bentley. That is the truth he carries with him every day. And that is the truth that made him, finally, into the father he was always meant to be. If you have ever been certain you were right only to discover you were wrong, remember this. The years spent in righteous anger cannot be reclaimed. The doors closed in pride cannot always be reopened. But the future remains unwritten. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, you get the chance to write it differently. Douglas Aldrich got that chance. He did not waste it. And that made all the difference. The end.